She didn't flinch when he walked into the room. His sister only smiled. That slow, icy smile he hadn't seen since they were teenagers. The one she used when she believed she had already won. Prescott should have known something was wrong the moment he got the text. Family meeting. Mum's house. He hadn't lived in that house for more than a decade, but the wording wasn't optional. He went anyway. He wore black like armor and carried nothing but his car keys and the weight of his grandfather's name. The room smelled of citrus polish and manipulation. His mother, Rosalind, sat at the head of the dining table like a queen who no longer had a throne but still claimed it. Her husband, Desmond, stood behind her, hands clasped as if he were her bodyguard. His sister, Isadora, already sat with her legs crossed, a glass of untouched wine in front of her. Then Prescott noticed them. 2 men in expensive suits, folders open, pens in hand. Rosalind's voice was smooth. "Prescott, meet our lawyers." He sat, but his spine stayed straight. "I'm Prescott Adeyemi. I'm 32. And last month my grandfather Barnaby, the man who raised me more than anyone else, left me his entire estate. Nearly £3 million, the house, the hardware chain, land in 3 counties. He left all of it to me, not to his daughter, not to anyone else. Me. 'Cause he knew. He always knew. They called it betrayal. They said he had manipulated Barnaby in his old age. That he had taken advantage of a dying man. But Prescott knew it wasn't true. This story, he thought, wasn't about the will itself. It was about what came after. About the blackmail his sister used against him, and how it led to an intervention none of them expected. Barnaby wasn't just family. He was a force. He built everything from nothing, starting with one hardware shop in a dusty corner of a market town before big chains existed. He used to say, "Success isn't about ideas. It's about sweat, the kind that stains your collar and breaks your back." Prescott believed him because he lived it. At 13, while friends spent Saturdays kicking a ball about, Prescott sorted screws and memorized stock codes. By secondary school, he could balance the books on the ledger paper Barnaby taught him to use. Rosalind never cared for any of it. She had married for comfort, not grit. When comfort faded, she remarried into something softer. Desmond never had a backbone. He simply drifted wherever Rosalind pushed. Isadora watched all of it, always smiling at the right moments. When Barnaby passed, he left Prescott the keys to everything. From the second the will was read, he was no longer son or brother. He was the enemy. The meeting began politely. The lawyers called it a clarification. They raised concerns about undue influence given Barnaby's declining health. Isadora stayed silent at first, but then she slid a manila envelope across the table. Inside were photocopies, emails, screenshots, private messages between him and Barnaby, notes Prescott left in the hospice binder, a spreadsheet from his laptop. Somehow she had hacked it. Isadora finally spoke, calm and crisp. "You were tracking finances before he was diagnosed. You were preparing." Rosalind leaned forward. "All we want, Prescott, is fairness." He didn't answer. Not because he lacked words but because he knew they didn't deserve them. Isadora pressed harder. "You can keep the house. But the business, that must be divided. If you refuse, we'll go to court. And this folder becomes public record." It was blackmail. From his own sister. Prescott breathed slowly, closing the folder without shaking. "Fine," he said aloud. But he didn't mean what they thought. This wasn't an ending. It was the beginning. They assumed he would fold. But this time he wasn't protecting them. He was protecting himself. He drove straight to the storage unit Barnaby once showed him. Inside were ledgers, contracts, handwritten journals, the history of the business. It smelled of cardboard and oil. He sat cross-legged in the dust and opened a file labeled Staff Reviews, 1986 to 2010. Seeing Barnaby's handwriting, strong and deliberate, made him cry quietly. No drama, just grief. People think betrayal is loud, shouting, slammed doors. But sometimes it's a sister sliding a folder across a table with a smile. Sometimes it's a mother watching you drown and asking why you don't smile more. Prescott stayed in that storage unit for hours pulling files, not because he needed them, he had copies, but because he needed to remember who he was. He remembered Saturdays with Barnaby tallying receipts, learning each employee's name, signing his first supplier check at 15 with shaking hands. Rosalind never saw any of that. To her, Prescott was just the boy who got lucky. Isadora, though. Isadora had been sharpening her knives for years. He thought back. At 16, he caught Isadora reading Barnaby's medical file. She said she was curious, but her eyes didn't match her tone. The same cold calculation he had seen at the dining table was already there. He just hadn't recognized it. That night, Prescott didn't sleep. He wandered his flat, touching things. The framed photo of him and Barnaby at the shop's reopening, the certificate Barnaby gave him after college. To Prescott, my partner in all things that matter. The estate wasn't money. It was proof Barnaby trusted him. They were trying to turn that into shame. But he wasn't ashamed. Not anymore. By morning he had a list. 3 tasks. Pull security footage from the shop, arrange a meeting with his lawyer, and, hardest of all, visit Aunt Marigold. She had cut ties 5 years earlier after a brutal falling out, but had always loved Barnaby. Unlike the others, she never asked Prescott for a penny. Aunt Marigold lived in a small cottage near the hills, wind chimes on the porch. She opened the door barefoot in a paint-splattered jumper. "You look tired," she said. "I am," he admitted. Over tea he told her enough. The blackmail, the lawyers, Isadora's cruelty. She didn't interrupt, only listened. Finally she said, "You know you don't owe them anything, right?" Prescott nodded, though he didn't believe it yet. His lawyer, Winifred, was sharp and steady, the kind of woman who could silence a courtroom with one raised eyebrow, and had more than once, according to her long-suffering secretary. He walked into her office and handed her the folder Isadora gave him. She skimmed it calmly. "These aren't threats," she said. "They're desperation. They can't win if you don't play their game." Then she added, "So let's build your own." That night, Prescott lay awake thinking of Barnaby's last words on the porch. "Blood makes you related. But loyalty is a choice." "Chose you," Prescott whispered into the dark. "Then I choose me now." The next morning he called Isadora. "I'll agree to another meeting," he said. "But everyone must be there. No excuses." She hesitated before agreeing. He ended the call before she could say more. Because he already pictured it. The table, the faces, the wine. They thought it was a surrender. But this time, Prescott wasn't the one being cornered. The evening arrived with a quiet sky. Prescott parked outside the old house and sat for one breath. Inside, the dining room lights were too bright. Everyone was already seated. Rosalind lifted her chin. Ready to speak like adults. Prescott placed his phone face down on the table. "I'm recording this," he said. "It's legal." Isadora's calm mask flickered. "There's no need." He answered, "There is." The lawyer cleared his throat. "We believe there were irregularities in the final months of Mr. Barnaby's planning." Prescott stood still. "Say what you mean." "Undue influence," the man replied. Prescott's voice stayed low. "Then read these." He slid a folder forward. Timelines, notarized powers of attorney, duplicate vault receipts. They read in silence. Papers rustled. Desmond tried to smile. "We thought this was a family matter." Prescott met his eyes. "So did I." The other lawyer shifted. "We will still request disclosures." "You'll receive them through my counsel," Prescott said. Rosalind clasped her glass with 2 hands. "You've hurt your sister." Prescott turned to Isadora. "What do you actually want?" Isadora placed her own folder down. "Evidence you acted before the diagnosis was public. That could be seen as overreach." Prescott shrugged lightly. "Unless I held legal authority." "Which I did." Rosalind snapped. "Don't play games." Prescott remained steady. I'm not. He reached into his bag and set down a sealed envelope. Barnaby's last letter. Dated. Verified. Witnessed. He read one line. To my grandson Prescott, you are the keeper of my work, not just my assets. He did not read more. He did not need to. Rosalind stared at the table. Desmond stood, then sat again. A small, comic panic, like a man who'd sat on a drawing pin and was too proud to say so. Isadora's pulse ticked in her throat. Prescott lifted his phone. You'll get copies, he said. From my lawyer. He walked out to a gold sky and let the silence breathe. He didn't sleep after the intervention. Not from fear, something colder had replaced it. He brewed tea in the small hours and opened a new folder on his laptop. Continuity. He wrote to Winifred. Review succession bylaws. He drafted a note to the board. Quarterly audits, external, permanent. Then he pulled out a small drive Barnaby once handed him. Use this if the wolves ever circle. The files were simple. Clean logs, supplier notes, short codes. It proved one thing. Barnaby had prepared for this storm. One name stood out. Tabitha Wren, a former clerk at the Ashcombe branch, quietly let go 2 years back. Margin note. Close to Isadora. Morning light found him at the Belmont office. He asked for Beatrice, the HR lead who had taught him to use a fax machine when he was a child, and once, memorably, unjammed one with a hair grip and a look of pure fury that Prescott still thought about fondly. I need the Ashcombe termination file, he said. Beatrice studied him, then nodded. Inside the file, weak performance notes, absence marks, and an odd unsigned resignation that ended. This job is emotionally unsafe. Prescott stared at the line. He took a photo and thanked Beatrice. He drove away with the feeling of a thread waiting to be pulled. By Thursday he found Tabitha. She arranged flowers in a narrow shop beside a laundrette. He stepped in quietly. Do you remember Barnaby's grandson? He asked. She froze with Shear's mid-snip, then exhaled. You came. They sat behind the shop under a rattling awning. I'm not here to threaten you, he said. I want to understand. Tabitha didn't pretend. She promised me a job, she said after a pause. A real title. Benefits. If she got control. She. Isadora. Tabitha swallowed. She told me Barnaby didn't trust you. Said you were chasing the inheritance. She gave me access to the office and told me what to copy. Prescott's stomach didn't drop. It settled. Why tell me now? Because I lost everything anyway, Tabitha answered. She pulled a small flash drive from her pocket. I don't want money. Just make sure they don't get away with it. Prescott nodded. Thank you. Winifred plugged the drive in, scanned the folders, and barely blinked. Email chains. Backdoor logins. Timestamps. Enough for a civil case, she said, tapping a list. Maybe more, if you push. Prescott shook his head. Not yet. Winifred folded her hands. Then we move in daylight. Policies. Process. Walls so clean they squeak. Prescott smiled for the first time that week. Let's build them. He called the 5 regional managers. In the conference room they looked wary. 3 men, 2 women, all older than him. He spoke in numbers, not drama. Transparency protocols. Reinvestment in training. Performance-based bonuses. Here are the budgets. He handed each a sealed letter in Barnaby's hand, written long ago. Quiet endorsements, personal notes, simple trust. Georgina from Ashford finished reading first and looked up. Whatever you need, Prescott. He exhaled once. Thank you. That night, he sat alone and read Barnaby's last letter in full. This family measures power by noise. You understand restraint. Protect what is worth keeping, even when it breaks you. His hands trembled. His breathing stayed steady. He folded the letter, slid it back into the drawer, and let the room go quiet without feeling small. His phone buzzed. A text from Isadora. Coffee? Just this. He stared, then typed one word, soon. They met at a pale cafe with white brick and glass cases of fancy pastries. Isadora sat alone, perfect posture. He sat across from her and waited. Maybe we went too far, she began softly. Maybe we both did. He said nothing. She continued. Families rebuild. Perhaps we can do that together. Prescott asked. What do you want, Isadora? She leaned back. Options. He reached into his bag and slid a thin folder across the table. She didn't touch it at first. I don't need more threats. It isn't a threat, he said. She opened it anyway. New board oversight policies, revised bylaws, a clause granting full indemnity if Prescott had to press charges based on evidence now held by counsel, including the contents of Tabitha's drive. He waited. This is me giving you what you wanted, he said. An option. Silence stretched. Her eyes moved fast, counting exits he had closed. He added one more line. Sign and this ends here. No lawsuits, no public mess. You keep your reputation. And I keep Mum from learning about your other accounts. Isadora's shoulders tightened. I don't know what you think you have. Prescott leaned in, calm as stone. I don't think. I know. She rose without finishing her drink. I'll have my lawyer review. Do that, he said. He watched her walk to her car with a step that wasn't quite steady. After she left, he ordered a tea he didn't want and called Rosalind. She answered on the third ring. He said, I'd like to stop by. A pause then, fine. When he arrived, Desmond's van was gone. Rosalind opened the door smaller than he remembered. Not shorter, just reduced. They sat in the old room. She said, Your grandfather didn't mean to hurt anyone. He didn't, Prescott replied. Her eyes softened. Isadora isn't herself. He answered quietly. She is exactly herself. He stood. I don't need your apology, he said. I do need your silence. Rosalind didn't argue. Power had left the room weeks ago. That evening Winifred called. She signed, Winifred said simply. You're in the clear. Prescott leaned against the window frame. Not relief, closure's first breath. There will be another storm, Winifred added. Be ready. He smiled without joy. I am. 2 days later came a small box with no return address. Inside, a printed photo of him and Barnaby at 14, both laughing, grease on Barnaby's collar. On the back, a note in an unfamiliar hand. Don't let them rewrite this. Prescott placed the photo on his desk and called HR. We're starting an internship program, he said. Local sixth form girls. Real training. Accounts and logistics. Beatrice's voice warmed. I'll draft the plan. He woke before sunrise and drove to the oldest shop. Dust lay soft on a stack of paint trays. He ran his fingers across metal shelves and let morning light wash the aisle numbers. In the office, the chair still held the shape of Barnaby's work. He sat and let himself breathe. Peace didn't come with fanfare. It came as a room that didn't ask him to defend himself. Autumn moved closer, and the pushback arrived as whispers. Rosalind posted a dinner photo with an empty chair and a caption about hard choices. A friend of Isadora's wrote about family loyalty in public comments, the sort of comment that gets 43 likes and one very confused reply from a man selling used caravans. Prescott did not reply. He hired 2 assistant managers, women who had started as part-time stock clerks, and gave them benefits, mentorship stipends, and a clear path forward. He drove to Hartwell, Millbrook, Kingsford, listened more than he spoke, and heard Barnaby return in other people's stories. 3 weeks after the agreement, an anonymous ethics report flagged an old supplier account. Winifred traced it to a shell company that, once unwound, touched a property firm where Desmond now consulted. A word he used the way other people used napping. Not theft, erosion. Small leaks sold as services never delivered. Do we pursue? Winifred asked. No, Prescott said. We cut the ties. Rewrite the contract language. Send a letter. Desmond did not call. Another thread slipped free. A month later, a message came from Cousin Prudence on Barnaby's side. Quiet folk who stayed out of the fight. We're hosting a simple memorial lunch, she wrote. Stories, not speeches. Prescott almost declined. He remembered Marigold's old line. You can protect yourself without disappearing. Just know which table you're walking into. He went. Folding chairs. Potluck plates balanced precariously on knees. Photo boards leaned against a wall. People stood to share small memories. Lifts home, patched fences, birthday cards years late but still signed in blue ink. A woman from Waverly pressed a worn photo into his palm. Teenage Prescott laughing at the counter with Barnaby. He used to say you saw the whole picture, she whispered. Prescott didn't cry. He just held the photo all the way home and finally felt the room inside him expand. That night, Prescott wrote the hardest letter of his life. Not to Isadora, not to Rosalind, not even to Barnaby. To himself. He wrote every truth he had avoided saying aloud. The grief, the anger, the loneliness. He admitted he missed the idea of family more than the people themselves. He admitted that sometimes he still looked at his phone, half expecting an apology that would never come. Then he folded the letter, sealed it, and placed it in the drawer beneath Barnaby's last note. A record for the man he was becoming. The next week, the internship program opened. Over 40 students applied. Some arrived shy, voices barely above a whisper. Others were full of fire from the moment they stepped inside, including one girl who marched straight past reception and informed Prescott that his filing system was, in her words, a crime against spreadsheets, and was hired on the spot. During one interview, a girl named Millicent asked, "How do you know when you're in charge?" Prescott smiled. You don't at first. But one day you make a decision that nobody questions. Then it feels like breathing. Months passed. The estate paperwork closed without appeal. The board adjusted to his leadership. His name was etched alongside Barnaby's on the headquarters plaque. But what struck Prescott most were the small shifts. The way employees greeted him without hesitation. The way the radios didn't fall silent when he walked through a shop. One afternoon a letter arrived. 4 words in Isadora's handwriting. I hope it was worth it. Prescott read it once, folded it neatly, and slid it into the shredder, which chose that exact moment to jam. A small, petty comedy that made him laugh out loud alone for the first time in months. Some words, he knew, didn't deserve a second reading anyway. That evening he cooked dinner for Marigold. On the balcony she studied him. You're quieter, she said. He nodded. It's not the same kind of quiet as before. She smiled faintly. Then maybe it's peace. Autumn cooled the air. For the first time in years, Prescott took a weekend away. No phone, no files, no defense to maintain. He drove to a cabin Barnaby once rented. The place still smelled of wood and dust, as if time had paused inside. He lit the fireplace, ate toast for dinner, and read a novel cover to cover without underlining a single word. That night he slept 8 full hours. No alarm. No anxious waking. Just rest. In the morning, he realized something that comforted and hurt at the same time. He had survived his own family. He looked at the old beams above the bed and whispered, I'm still here, Grandpa. I kept it. Back in the city, life continued. Shops opened. Employees worked. The board met on Tuesdays. But Prescott moved through it all differently. He no longer carried every moment like a battle. The business didn't feel like a fortress to defend from relatives. It felt like a foundation he could finally build on. In October, a local women's group honored the internship program. He nearly skipped the ceremony, but Millicent and 2 other interns sat in the front row, their new name badges gleaming. He stood at the podium and told a story about Barnaby. How legacy was never about blood, but about trust, about showing up when it wasn't convenient. He didn't mention Isadora or Rosalind or blackmail. He ended simply. The hardest part of leadership isn't making decisions. It's refusing to become the kind of person you have to protect yourself from. The applause was steady, not loud, but it filled him with something real. Weeks later, he returned to the original shop. The door creaked the same. The walls smelled faintly of oil and wood. In aisle 6, tucked behind paint tins, he found Barnaby's old stool, dented, scarred, still waiting. Prescott sat on it and closed his eyes. Not to remember. To rest. Outside, evening light poured gold through dusty windows. He breathed deeply, steady at last. Some endings don't arrive with slammed doors or courtroom victories. They come quietly, in a chair that still holds your grandfather's shape, in the stillness of shelves that don't ask for anything. Prescott opened his eyes, stood and whispered, "Not for them. Not for ghosts. For me." And for the first time he felt free.